Hey kids, Flexing Teacher Weber here. It's Friday night. I got a cup of coffee and I figured nothing better than do a little math on a Friday night. And I know you probably feel the same way. What we did this week was calculating amounts with percents, getting into more problem solving with percents. So what I thought we'd do is review some of those questions that we did. Now previously we'd been doing this kind of thing with estimating. Now what I want to do is show the difference between estimating and calculating, and that's what we started out doing. So what I had the kids do was do an estimate first. I always like to start with estimating because you really get an idea for what the value of the numbers can be. And then this week we started looking at calculating, where you get the exact answer. So we did some problems. I have a book of surveys, and this is a survey from a few years ago. A survey showed 82% of 400 middle school students surveyed own a smartphone. How many of these 400 students surveyed own a smartphone? So what we want to do first is estimate 82% of 400. So we would do some of the mental math and rounding that we did previously. So we'd want to start off saying, okay, well, I can round 82% to 80%. 80% of 400. And then to estimate that, I would probably start with 10% of 400. And we know 10% of 400 is just taking the decimal point that's at the end of 400 and shifting it one to the left. So that's 40. Oops. I'll stick with my same color there. That's 40. And then to go from 10% to 80%, I would multiply by 8. So then approximately 320 students surveyed own a smartphone. So that's what we had previously been doing when we were estimating. Now to calculate this, we don't round off the numbers. We do 82% of 400. We use mental math to change the percent to a decimal. So even though we don't see it, there's a decimal after 82%, and that decimal shifts 2 spaces to the left when we turn that into a decimal. And so this becomes 0 and 82 hundredths. To calculate the exact amount, we take that decimal and multiply by the amount, 400. Now, this is one of the few times of the year I'll allow students to use technology. I'll let them use calculators to figure out this multiplication. They don't have to, but I'll let them. It's one of the few times this year we'll do it. So we do 82 hundredths times 400, and we get an answer of exactly 328 students. And that matches our estimate quite well. When I do a test on this too, I'll have some questions where they'll do estimating without a calculator and some questions where they'll calculate with a calculator. And I don't mind letting them use a calculator a little bit on these ones because that way you can do some more real world problems where you get some really wacky numbers and we can focus a bit on the problem solving. But for the most part, I'm not a big fan of calculators. They tend to stop the thinking a lot of time. But we will use them very sparingly. So that's what we were focusing on this week. So we did some other problems. Here's another one. On the same survey, 5 1/4 of 800 students surveyed use inline skates to get to school. How many students use inline skates to get to school? So with this one, again, I thought it would be good to show the difference between estimating and calculating. So we'll do an estimate and we'll calculate. So we'll start with the estimate, and we want to estimate 5 1/4%. You know what? I'll do my estimating in one color and calculating in another. There we go. So we'll do 5 1/4% of 800. And remember, when we're estimating, we want to round off to reasonable numbers. So a reasonable number to round off here to would be 5% of 800. But we wouldn't start with 5%, even though technically we could, because 5% means to divide by 20. And that would be really reasonable to do. But so the kids can maintain a consistent pattern, I might get them to first do 10% of 800, because they should be really good at that by now. And 10% of 800 means take the decimal point at the end of 800 and shift it one to the left. And 10% of 800 is 80. Oh, I don't want the blue. I want to keep using the same color. 10% of 800 is 80. Now, to go from 10% to 5%, we would chop that 80 in half, divide by 2, and we would get, again, approximately 40 students will rollerblade to school. It's definitely not a Canadian school, probably, or at least not Winnipeg. For the calculation, you're going to do 5.25% of 800. Now, 5.25% is the same as saying I'm going to write that in a different spot here. Is the same as saying 5.25% of 800. Right? 1/4, the fraction 1/4 is the same as the decimal 0.25. But this number's still a percent. It doesn't become a decimal until we shift that decimal point 2 spots to the left. 1, 2. And in that open spot, we put a 0. So this becomes 0.0525 times 800. It's when we get to this part where I'll let them use their technology. So that answer is equal to 42 students. And that's the exact answer. So you got to be able to use some mental math to convert the percent to a decimal, and then you can use some technology to get the exact answer. Okay, so that's what we've been focusing on this week. And the focus is on calculating. This next question says, Mr. FS has 145% as much money in his wallet as Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber has $35 in his wallet. How much money does Mr. FS have? Well, we're just going to calculate this one. And what we're interested in is that Mr. FS has 145% as much money as Mr. Weber, or he has 145% of $35. Now, to calculate this exact amount, you want to take the percent and make it a decimal. You'll use mental math for that. Even though we don't see it, behind that 5, behind that ones digit, there's a decimal. I'll put it in red. And we always shift that decimal 2 spots to the left to turn that percent into decimal form. So what we have now is 1 and 45 hundredths multiplied by $35. And at this point, I'll let them use a little technology to get this exact answer. 1 and 45 hundredths times 35. And that's going to be $50, dollar sign in front, 75 cents. That's how much Mr. FS has in his wallet. And he should have more than me because he's got 145% as much as me. Plus, he's a better saver than me, and he's a really good investor, too. He's a pretty smart guy. Okay, let's do a couple more. So this one says find 18 2/5% of $46 to the nearest cent. So we're interested in finding 18 2/5% of $46. Okay, so we have to take this percent and make it a decimal. Now we have to focus on the 2/5. 2/5, I'll do this up here. 2/5 can be made into a fraction out of 10 by timesing by 2 times by 2. That's 4 out of 10. 1 decimal spot because there's 1 0. And it's 0 and 4/10. So we can say 18 2/5 is the same as 18.4% of $46. But the tricky thing for the kids is that this is not in decimal form yet. It's not in decimal form until we've taken this decimal and moved it 2 spaces to the left by dividing by 100. And so now in decimal form, this is now 0 and 184 thousandths. And once it's in decimal form, we'll multiply it by that amount. and I will let the kids use a calculator for that. Let's use a little technology here. So 184 thousandths times 46. And we get an answer of 8.464. Now, money has to be rounded to 2 decimal spots. That's why I put in the question here, rounded to the nearest cent. So we've got a 4 and a 6. We have to round this off. So my grade 5 math teacher, Mr. Radmacher, used to tell me, if you want to round off a number, you look to the digit to the right of it. If the digit to the right is 4 or less, you give the number you're rounding a rest. So we're going to give that 6 a rest, which means we're going to keep it the same. Oh, I don't want that. We're going to keep it the same. And we're going to say our dollar amount is $8.46. That's what 18 2/5% of $46 is. Okay, so kids have to do a little bit of rounding as well when they're working with money. Last question. So last question we have here, we'll say 6 and 5/10% of 100. That's not a very good dollar sign. $147.50. First thing you do is use mental math to make the percent a decimal. Now, a lot of people say, Mr. Weber, this is easy. It's already got a decimal. It's a percent that has a decimal part. To make it a decimal, you divide it by 100 and you'll shift that decimal 2 spots to the left. You'll put a 0 in that open spot, and this is going to become 0.065 times $147.50. At this point, and this is the only time you need to use this, we could use some technology, 0.065 times $147.50, and you're going to get this decimal, 9.5875. Now again, money needs to have 2 decimal spots. So we're going to need this and this. So we're going to round off the 8. We're going to look to the digit to the right. My old grade 5 math teacher, Mr. Radmacher, used to say, when you're rounding numbers, if the one to the right of the one you're rounding is 5 or more, you raise the score. So since we're rounding the 8 and the digit to the right of it is 7, it's 5 or more, and we're going to raise the score of that 8. So this is going to become $9.59. Now, we also talked about how if you were paying with digital money, that you would pay $9.60 and you'd be screwed out of a penny. But if you were paying with cash, you'd pay $9.60 and you'd be screwed out of a penny. But if you're paying with digital money, you would pay exactly $9.59. So we talked a little bit about pennies as well. So that's how you calculate amounts with percents, and that's our focus right now. So I gave the kids an assignment today. It's a 4.2 worksheet, numbers 1 to 29 odd. I said they just had to do the odd numbers, and they had to show all their work. And they could do the evens if they wanted. And there's also attached, I didn't give this to them, but I put it in the digital copy that I sent to you. There's also some harder questions if they're looking for more of a challenge and more practice. Anyway, that's how you do calculating amounts with percents. Hopefully that'll help the kids with their homework on the weekend. That's all for now. Have a great weekend. Flexing Teacher Weber out.